I drove long-haul truck a few years back, but have since moved to local deliveries. During my time on the open road, I saw a lot of things that people would say were scary. I'd agree, but since I'd lived them, I would say they were downright terrifying. One night, I pulled into a truck stop around midnight after a long day on the road. I was so tired, I didn't even think about going to the diner to eat. I just crawled in back, pulled the curtains between the cab and the bed, and fell asleep. Must have forgotten to lock the door because around 2 in the morning, my cab lights turn on, waking me up to the fact that somebody opened the doors. Of course, that worried me. There are some nasty people in those stops, looking to rob you or worse. I grabbed the bat I kept under the bunk, then pulled the curtain aside. I was shocked when I saw the large eyes of a young girl staring at me from the front seat. She was shaking and scared, couldn't have been much older than 16. She begged me not to kick her out and explained quickly that there were some men looking for her. They had kidnapped her a few days ago in the back of a van, and they've been on the road ever since. Her large brown eyes quivered in fear as she pleaded with me for help. It must have pulled a heartstring because at that point, how could I not help her? I was going to call the police, but she asked me not to do that either. She had run away from home where she lived with an abusive stepfather. If the police got her, they would send her back to that. It seemed to be a damned if you do, damned if you don't kind of situation. Finally, we agreed that we would lock the doors and get some sleep. In the morning, I would let her call her aunt, who would come and get her. Around 4 in the morning, I woke up again. I could hear 2 people talking up front. One was the girl, and the other was a male voice I didn't recognize. They were whispering in hushed tones. "Take the money," I heard the girl say. "We gotta deal with them," the man's voice said. "We got his wallet and everything else. Just leave him be. We have to get out of here before he wakes up," the girl replied. I reached under my bunk to grab my bat so I could defend myself. But when my hand went under to look for it, I couldn't find it. Unarmed, I just laid there waiting to see what would happen. She must have convinced him somehow to not hurt me because next thing I know, I see the light turn on and then hear the cab door shut. A moment later, I looked out the window to see the 2 of them run across the lot and hop into a minivan then take off. My best guess was that she was a diversion. She prowled the lots looking for men dumb enough to let her in, and then spun a tale to put them at ease. She would make sure that the doors were unlocked, and the driver unarmed for her accomplice to come along and rob them, and deal with them if they were discovered. Who knows what would have happened if she hadn't talked him out of dealing with me. I kinda fibbed to my insurance agent because I was pretty ashamed to admit I got tricked by a teenage girl. To me, the scariest part of the story is that I fell for such a stupid trick. This one happened in southern Arizona. I had stopped at a rest stop pretty much out in the middle of nowhere to stretch my legs and use the facilities. When I came out, there was a man, late 30s, early 40s if I had to guess, circling my truck. No one else was there. He was just looking it up and down, which was very odd. He asked me where I was going. I just said I was going on a delivery and hopped in. Didn't really want to make small talk, since I was already wary of this guy and why he was asking. Like I said, we were in the middle of nowhere, and when I pulled in, there was no one else around, and when I came out, there were no other cars at the rest stop. So how he got there and what he was doing was beyond me. Took off a few miles down the road, and this blue Dodge Charger comes gunning up right behind me. Okay, open road and the driver was just opening her up, I thought to myself. No big deal. The car gained on me fast, almost in the blink of an eye. Clearly it had a modified engine. The blue car pulled in front of me and slammed on its brakes. I barely had time to react, but was able to swerve and miss it. When I passed it, I looked over to their driver's side window and saw it was the same man from the rest stop. But he wasn't alone. In the car with him were 2 other men. I put the pedal down and got going as fast as I could. They caught up to me and tried the same thing again. I couldn't believe that they were trying to do some Fast and Furious moves. All I was hauling was some car parts, but maybe it didn't matter what my load was. This game of cat and mouse went on for a while until finally I had enough. When they pulled in front of me, I swerved a bit, but just enough to hit the edge of their rear bumper. That made them spin around and out of my way. I then gunned it as fast as I could to the next town and called the police. After that incident is when I stopped carrying the bat and switched to a pistol. This next one, I just want to start off by saying, I don't really believe in ghosts and all that, but I'm not sure how else to explain what happened that night. It was really late, and again, I had had a long day of driving. So when I found this small rest stop on the side of the road, I decided to take it. The parking lot was really dark, and there was only one light at the entrance to where the facilities were. Everything outside of the light's range was pitch black. Whatever, I was tired and didn't care. This happened after the first story I told you about, so trust me when I say the doors were locked this time. I pulled in, went to the facilities, came back and crawled into my bunk after making sure the doors were locked. I can't stress that part enough. Woke up multiple times to something knocking on the truck doors, but when I would look outside, there would be no one there. After the third time, I got my gun and went out to check. Now, maybe someone was hiding out in the darkness, but when I went out and circled the truck, there was no one there. After that, the cabin lights would turn on, indicating my doors had been opened, but when I pulled the curtain back, the lights would go off, and sure enough, the doors were closed and still locked. When the sun rose in the morning, I was still exhausted because I hadn't been able to get any uninterrupted sleep the night before. I got out to go use the facilities, but when I got to the doors, they were locked, and the facility looked like it hadn't been operating in years. I couldn't believe it since just the night before I had used it and it looked fine. Now it looked run down, and one of the windows was even boarded up. If that wasn't bad enough, on the way back to my truck, I looked over to the right, past a little field, and noticed a small graveyard was on the opposite side of the field. That was enough for me, and I got back in my truck and made good time to the next town. I was going through Washington State from Spokane to Seattle with a load. I just got through Ellensburg, which is a fairly small town right before the mountain passes. It was getting late, not too dark out yet, but right around dusk. There wasn't much traffic on the road that night, just a few other cars and maybe a truck or two. Point is that I couldn't have been the only one to have seen this. Going through a wooded area right before the mountains and about a mile up the road, there was a large bump on the side of it. I figured it was roadkill, like a deer. That's pretty common around those parts. Get closer to it and realize it's not just a deer, but there was something else next to it. Get even closer and now I can make out a shape silhouetted by the setting sun. Something was crouched over the deer and seemed to be eating it. When I finally passed it and looked into the side mirror, I could see it more clearly with the sun on it instead of behind it. It was a human-like creature crouched down, taking chunks out of the deer. It looked like it had a brown fur covering it. I couldn't have been the only one to have seen this. Like I said, there were a couple of other vehicles on the road with me, but I was the only one that stopped. This was before cell phones had cameras on them, but I did always keep a disposable camera on me in case I needed it for insurance reasons or whatever. I grabbed it and hopped out of the truck, but by the time I got out, the thing was gone. Maybe I misidentified it with the light going down and all that, but to me, it looked like it was crouched down and eating. Clearly, it was using its hands to eat and not just shoving its face into the carcass. It definitely didn't look like a wolf or a bear. Even that much could be made out with the sun going down. Last one for now. Maybe later I can tell some more, but the rest I have are fairly mundane compared to these. Anyways, this one was a cross-country trip, but the events happened in Iowa. It's all cornfields and flat lands out there, so maybe this was kind of a road hypnosis type thing. Not really sure. Early morning, probably around 5 a.m. if I remember correctly. Out on the road and no one else is around at that time. Driving down an old stretch of highway with a cup of coffee in my hand, when off to my right, I noticed some lights hovering above the field. Cool, it's a helicopter, I thought. Then the lights start dipping and swerving in ways no helicopter can. 90-degree angles, adjusting the flight path on a dime, that kind of thing. Now I'm a little worried, just praying the sun will come up soon and show me what it really is. Next thing I know, the light starts to follow me. They're still too far away to make out what the lights are coming from. My best guess is that it was one object with multiple lights by the way they all moved together. But who knows? They follow me for a few miles, always too far away to make out anything. By this time, I'm coming up to a small hill in the road. I can see lights coming up the other side and feel a little relief that there's signs of human life out here. The lights on my right never go away, but the lights in front now crest the hill and they are super bright. Brighter than any halogen lights out there. They get closer and closer and the lights on the side of me are still there. Finally, the white lights in front get so bright that I have to use one hand to shade my eyes. Now the lights are coming right at me and I'm worried I'm about to crash, but I feel almost paralyzed and can't swerve. The white lights become all I can see, and then in a blink of an eye they're gone, and so were the lights that were to the side of me. I still can't explain what happened that morning, and like I said, maybe it was some strange highway hypnosis. I don't drink or do drugs, so those are ruled out. But this one is what scares me the most out of all the other stories. That feeling of being paralyzed and not in control shook me to the core and played a major decision in why I don't do long-haul trucking anymore. I know most people won't believe some of these stories, and that's okay. If they hadn't happened to me, I wouldn't have believed them either. In fact, they did happen to me, and I still don't want to believe them. Well, I hope you enjoyed them, and maybe I'll send some of those more mundane stories at a later time.